So, for some godforsaken reason, you want to get into VR. On this channel, we've talked about the many faults of VR software. The clunky controls, the lack of focus. You tell them, Reg.
If it's not fun, why bother?
But today, I want to talk about the hardware itself, specifically where some headsets excel and where others fall short, the types of things that make people put their headset down and never pick them back up again. Here's our lineup. An original Vive to remember where we came from, a Quest 2 because it's still a great deal, especially lightly used, a Vive Pro 2 to see how far Vive has come, or not, a Quest Pro to see what Meta can do with a $1,500 original MSRP, a Vario Arrow, and something a little unique. This is an E4 from a company called DPVR, our sponsor for this video. Okay, wait, somebody sponsored us? All the jokes I've made, somebody actually did it? Needless to say, DPVR knows very well what this channel is about. They gave me this headset, and I've got some good things to say about it, and I've got some bad things to say about it. You're gonna notice that's kind of a trend. There isn't just a perfect headset out there for every single person. With that out of the way, here's how this is gonna go down. I'll be comparing these headsets in 3 games that represent different but very common VR use cases. First is Kanojo VR for the ultimate hot Japanese girlfriend. First is Age 3, a shooter, specifically to test tracking and precision, something that's always been difficult with inside-out tracked headsets and controllers. Assetto Corsa for some demanding sim racing action, and of course VR Chat with base station full body to test out the drift, check out the onboard audio, and especially to see if the headset is comfortable during long play sessions. I own and use all of these headsets except for the Quest Pro. My friend Grab will let me take it for a spin. A quick rundown of each headset. Let me start this off by saying you could bludgeon somebody to death with an original Vive and it would probably still work. It's built like a brick and is just as reliable as one. The screens are the only thing showing their age. You can count each pixel if you're bored. They kinda suck. Fresnel lenses so you get blur and high contrast scenes, and here's a simulated POV. I'll be doing simulated POVs with all of these headsets because through the lens footage just isn't helpful or reflective of the real experience. The IPD for the Vive goes from 61mm to 72mm. The original Vive is still a great value because you can pick them up used for around $200 at the high end. And that's for a full kit. Just, if you buy used, please swap out the face gasket. It's like $20. The Vive Pro 2 is nowhere near as reliable as the original purely due to software issues in my case, which really sucks when it's $800 for just a headset. It's been my daily driver for 2 years now, and when it works, it's alright. The FOV is great, but you might see that those black bars got a bit bigger than the last one. That's just how these lenses are made to achieve the wider FOV. The screens are great, but I noticed that they definitely bump up the saturation a ton. IPD for the Pro 2 goes from 57mm to 70mm. It's Quest 2 time. I don't need to go too much into detail, you all know exactly what this is. I swapped the head strap out with something a little more comfortable than the stock one, and a face gasket that isn't a dish sponge. It's still Fresnel, so you get that blur and high contrast scenes, but you don't need to have base stations. Standalone is there if you want it, and it's PC VR compatible but with a lot of compression. Here's what broken compression looks like. You're welcome. I just really don't like compression. Their IPD adjustment is pretty weird too. There's only 3 settings. 58mm, 63mm, and 68mm. So if you don't fall into one of those or very close, it's gonna be a little uncomfortable. Still a good value used because there are simply too many out there. The Quest Pro, same everything as the Quest 2, including the compression, but with a really nice head strap, controllers with their own tracking cameras so there aren't any blind spots, and the option to play VR without any sort of light blocker, which is something that I love. Fresnel lenses are finally replaced by nice pancake optics. Full face tracking is included, and that's awesome. It's something that you really can't get anywhere else unless you get a Vive Pro I, which is discontinued, a G2 Omnicept, which is discontinued, and a Vive Face Tracker, which altogether costs way too much. It makes the $1,000 of the Quest Pro seem like a deal. IPD goes from 55 to 75mm, or instead of trying to buy a Quest Pro or a discontinued headset, really blow the budget and get this. A Vario Arrow. If you know, you know. Varjo is a weird brand that makes mainly enterprise headsets. This, for the time being, is their only consumer headset, but it's hard to say that it's consumer grade when it costs $2,000. For that money, you get insane resolution. Oh,
Mr. President, I got bad news.
So it's $1,000 now? Oh my God. Okay, be calm. Whew. Before you go out and get one, know that these aren't compatible with any AMD GPUs. I really don't see enough people talking about that. For that money, you get insane resolution, even higher than the Beyond, and eye tracking which allows you to use foveated rendering and even better automatic IPD adjustment. You put the headset on, look at a dot, and the lenses move to your IPD automatically. The FOV is not anything special, similar to what you'd get on the Quest 2. And when you plug it in, it sounds like a f***ing fax machine. With the price cut, these things are a legitimate value now. And finally, the DPVR E4, which retails for around $550. Remember my biggest gripe with the Quest 2 and the Pro, the compression? This is PC native. It's inside-out track. Want to play without being completely in a dark bubble? You can just take the light blocker off. The E4 can be thought of essentially as a Quest 2, but for PC VR use only, and that's for the better. While it's still Fresnel lenses, it's important to note that there are good and bad Fresnel lenses. These are on the better side in terms of clarity without streaking. Among a few things like manufacturing cost and etc., Fresnel tends to be much lighter than the lenses that we would see on something like the Quest Pro. And if you're okay with a little bit of streaking, that weight really shows. The E4 weighs hardly anything at all. Some other reviewers said it felt cheap, but I don't quite agree. Everything has a nice matte feel besides this weird holographic faceplate thing. I don't even know what they call it, but it looks cool. Being an OG DS Lite gamer, I was worried a bit about this hinge, but it feels solid with no play up and down or side to side. With its build quality, I'm fairly confident that this headset would last. From the promo material that I had seen, I was a bit worried that this top strap would start to rip out my hair, but it's a nice slippery matte texture, and I never experienced any sort of discomfort with it. The unboxing experience was also surprisingly nice overall. I was shocked by just how much padding they added, even in places where it wasn't necessary, but it was nice. The headset has onboard audio in the head strap, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack so that you can use basically whatever you want. The coolest feature of this thing has to be the fact that you can just flip it up. Right, so like I'm gonna go get a drink, I wanna get the headset out of my eyes, I could just go. DPVR's own software was as easy as it gets to set up. Just click visitor and go ahead. Because they aren't as big in the US as other manufacturers, I was a bit worried about the controllers being incompatible with a few games, but with a click of a button, you can tell Steam exactly how to treat DPVR's controllers, basically letting it emulate whatever input you want. IPD adjustment is done through software in their setup. Honestly, kinda confusing, but it works. The IPD goes from 58mm to 74mm using their tool, and the screen has a really nice 120Hz refresh rate, but I find the colors to be a bit washed out. Here's a quick look at all their controllers. Please note that the Arrow doesn't come with any. Quest 2 and Quest Pro controllers are good and comfortable. Index controllers are my overall favorite, and the E4's controllers are basically just a Quest 2 controller without those little touch pads. And I'd bet that they use the exact same stick as a Switch Joy-Con. Just kinda look at them. They even feel the same. I personally don't mind Joy-Con joysticks, but they're known to develop drift over time, so something to consider. And Vive ones, well, they're the perfect murder weapon. Unfortunately, my homie Carson had to go back home to Mormon land or whatever, so the Quest Pro won't be included in these results. Although I did get some time with it linked to a PC, and with its clarity, I would assume it would do fairly well in all these tests. It was comfortable to use. I still think it's a great option, even with the price drop of the Arrow. A quick note to all the companies out there before we get started. That is not what 60Hz looks like, and that is not what 2K looks like. I get it, you're trying to say 4K is clearer than 2K, and 120Hz is smoother than 60Hz, but that is false advertising. With that out of the way, it's time for the fun part. FPS games are a really great test of a few things for VR headsets. First, they can require quick movements. This is really important when it comes to the weight of a headset. Second, they can really push inside-out tracked controllers to their limits, exposing any kind of tracking flaw that they may have. H3 is a shooting range sim, so Gravel and I went to one so that I could refresh my memory. The first test is pretty simple. Carefully placing a grouping of 5 shots at 30 yards with a run-of-the-mill AR-15 and iron sights. Any jitter in the controllers and it'll be noticed. It's not my fault if I miss. Since the Arrow doesn't come with controllers, I wasn't able to test it. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. All of the base station tracked controllers and headsets had basically the same result, as you could expect. The real concern here is for the inside-out tracked pair, that being the Quest 2 and the E4. To be honest, I didn't really notice anything crazy between the two, although the E4 controllers do have some type of smoothing on them, which is helpful, but I couldn't find any option to disable it. Their software does have a dark mode though, thank God. Now for something a bit sweatier and not like that. I know that this is kind of a weird test out of the blue, especially for a VR chat channel, but sim racing can get really uncomfortable. Depending on the car that you're driving and the wheel that you're using, you can get really sweaty. The main thing I'm looking for here is comfort and keeping the temperature down. So I picked a really tough car and track combo. A 1963 Shelby Cobra. 304 buff horsepower. Too much goddamn torque and 0 assists. At the tiny Tsukuba circuit. I'm just gonna lay down 20 hot laps and just see how I feel. The Arrow worked. Crystal clear, the active cooling kept the heat down. Not much else to say. It's great. The Vive, if I didn't know the track, it would be really hard to tell where the next corner was. The Pro 2 got too hot, but at least I was able to see the track. In the Quest 2, the heat wasn't super noticeable, but what was noticeable was all of the goddamn compression. And the E4, I chose to play without the light blocker. It's just what I prefer. I'm able to see my shifter through my peripheral vision. Heat doesn't build up nearly as quickly as any other headset. It's just great. Its high refresh rate did make the car feel a bit more responsive. The onboard audio between the Quest 2 and the E4 is good enough to hear when the tires are letting go, something that is really important in sim racing games because you can't necessarily feel that. And now for the final test. The vast majority of you are going to be playing VR chat and probably mirror dwelling a lot, so I'll be using VR chat to do the most important test for you and me. That's comfort over a long play session, testing microphone quality, and looking for drift. You've probably heard about drift before. Maybe you've seen someone making this goofy move in VR chat. Let me explain a bit to catch you up to speed, just in case you're out of the loop. Base station tracking basically never drifts. So if you have a base station tracked headset, controllers, and trackers, you're never going to experience this unless something is very, very wrong. But if you have a Quest 2 or another inside-out tracked headset, after a while of playing, you might notice that your Vive trackers have shifted. And that's where this silly movement comes in. When you see someone doing this, they're syncing up their base station track stuff to their inside-out track stuff in order to fix the drift. In theory, the more accurate a headset's inside-out tracking is, the longer it will take to drift. This whole issue can be avoided by putting a tracker on top of the headset and using continuous calibration, but there isn't anywhere to put one on the E4 unless you're okay with losing its coolest feature. It's really weird. I can flip it up. Look at what my avatar does. Drift is the most prevalent when you have fast movements over a longer duration of time. So I'll be doing the best test that I know of. 20 minutes straight of rock lobster over and over and over. It's pretty hard to make this thing drift. And now for one of the most important things to test on the E4. How does the mic sound? Hey, y'all seem chill. I got a question. Is my microphone like usable or does it suck?
It sounds fine to me.
It's almost like you're eating your mic, you know?
It's doing the mic anymore. Yeah, so.
I'm not sure what that means. Naku, you goofball, what do you think about my mic?
Sounds a little loud.
And now we get to talk about my favorite thing, comfort. I spent a little while in VR chat with each headset on, doing things that I normally do like lay down, sit down, dance a little bit, that sort of thing, just to get a good idea of the comfort of each headset in a pretty normal VR chat session. Personally, I think the Arrow's head strap leaves a little bit to be desired. This simply could be user error because I don't know how to use all these adjustments quite yet, but it wasn't the worst thing. The modded Quest 2, well, I modded it for comfort, so it's pretty goddamn comfortable. The Vive itself, I just really don't like soft straps anymore. Pro 2, comfortable, but again, it got hot. And for a verdict on the E4, I'm pleasantly surprised by both the hardware and the software. I do have some gripes, specifically with some of the marketing tactics that are used, and this box that just likes to dangle, or having this cable just always connected to your PC. But I will say, the build quality is above my expectations. The lack of compression is great, but the flip-up feature is something I need to see more of. The onboard speakers are good enough, but be ready to run it at like 75% rather than 100% volume. Otherwise, they tend to get way too harsh. Overall, it was a great headset to use, and I don't think you're making a bad choice in getting one, as long as you know what you're getting into. VR tends to go through ups and downs, but right now, things are heating back up big time. The Arrow price drop, the Quest 3 is out like next month. The Beyond, man, it's just exciting. If none of these headsets tickle your fancy, it isn't a bad idea to just wait for a while and see what else comes up. Thank you all for watching, and a special thank you to my homie Wizard, STIJN, Xander, Nicer Dicer, Biz, and Zavtra for joining the Patreon. If you did make it this far, I really appreciate it. Comment, I bought a Vario Arrow and now my wife is going to kill me, so that I can personally thank you. This was a bit different than what I normally make, but I hope you found value in it and enjoyed the watch.